ranch house was quieter than it had ever been, the kind of silence that didn't soothe but pressed against the walls and settled deep into the chest. Outside, the storm raged with relentless force, rain striking the windows like impatient fingers, demanding to be let in. Inside, the fire crackled low, casting unsteady shadows that danced across the wooden floor. She stood near the fireplace, her back to him, shoulders tense beneath a damp coat that no longer felt like protection. The rancher watched her from across the room, his boots planted firmly, as if moving even a step might shatter something fragile and unseen. "Don't stop me," she said softly. Her voice carried no challenge, no temptation, only exhaustion and a quiet determination born from too many nights of fear. She didn't turn around when she spoke. It was as if she needed to say the words without meeting his eyes, needed to know whether they would still hold their meaning in the open air between them. His heart thudded heavily in his chest. He should have spoken, should have reminded her that this moment was dangerous, that kindness could easily blur into regret. But his throat tightened, memories of past mistakes and old guilt freezing him in place. He had spent years building walls around himself, convincing himself that distance was safety, for him and for anyone who wandered too close. She slowly shrugged the coat from her shoulders and let it fall to the floor. The movement was deliberate, not dramatic. It felt less like an invitation and more like a confession. Weeks of running, years of surviving, all seemed to slip from her in that single act. She hadn't come to the ranch searching for anything more than shelter, yet somehow it had become the one place where she could breathe without fear of being chased. "I'm not asking for anything," she said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were steady now, clear and unafraid. "I just need to know that what I do is my choice." The words struck him harder than any storm. In that moment, he understood this had nothing to do with desire. It was about control, about reclaiming a sense of self that had been stripped away piece by piece. His silence had never been about indifference. It had been about fear of crossing, a line he could never uncross. "I won't stop you," he said at last, his voice low but certain. "And I won't touch you unless you ask me to." Relief flickered across her face, brief but unmistakable. She nodded once, then moved to sit by the fire, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. The storm continued through the night, but inside the ranch house, something had shifted. Two people, both carrying scars they rarely spoke of, had reached an unspoken understanding. It wasn't romance. It wasn't rescue. It was trust, fragile, tentative, and powerful. Neither of them slept much before morning came, and both knew that whatever happened next, the moment they shared would mark the beginning of a life no longer guided by fear but by choice. Morning arrived quietly, slipping into the ranch house on pale threads of light that softened the sharp edges left behind by the storm. The fire had burned down to embers, and the air carried the faint scent of smoke and wet earth. She woke on the couch with the blanket still wrapped around her, surprised by how safe she felt. Safety had always been temporary in her life, something borrowed and easily taken away. Yet here it lingered, steady and real. Outside, the rancher worked in silence, repairing a fence that didn't truly need fixing. His hands moved on instinct, while his thoughts stayed tangled in the night before. He replayed her words again and again, the quiet strength in her voice, the way she had stood her ground without demanding anything from him. Freezing had once been his greatest weakness, but this time it had kept them both intact. When she stepped onto the porch, the sound of the door closing behind her made him turn. For a moment neither spoke. The space between them felt different now, no longer charged with uncertainty, but filled with awareness, as if they were both carefully learning the shape of something new. "I didn't mean to stay so long," she said finally. "I never planned to." He leaned against the fence, studying her face. "You didn't overstay," he replied. "You just arrived when you needed to." The honesty surprised them both. She took a breath, then let pieces of her past slip free, not the details, not the names, but the weight of it. She spoke of being silenced, of choices taken from her so often that she had nearly forgotten what it felt like to make one for herself. Last night hadn't been about closeness. It had been about reclaiming control, about proving to herself that her body and her decisions were still her own. He listened without interrupting, without offering solutions or promises he couldn't keep. For the first time in years, someone wasn't trying to save her. He was simply there. "I was afraid," he admitted when she finished. "Afraid that if I moved, I'd become someone I don't want to be." She smiled faintly. "And instead you became someone I could trust." The words settled between them, quiet but powerful. They didn't define what they were or what they might become. They didn't need to. As the days passed, their routine grew naturally. Shared meals, honest conversations, long hours of work that made the silence comfortable instead of heavy. The ranch stopped feeling like a hiding place and began to feel like a beginning. She still planned to leave. He didn't ask her to stay, yet both understood that whatever waited beyond the dirt road would be different now. Fate hadn't turned their lives upside down in a single dramatic moment. It had done something gentler, something far more lasting. It had given them a choice and the courage to respect it.